SN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Well, future of the country, where is it heading? Well, we're going to talk with Lowell Ponte. Lowell, your author, latest book, We've Seen the Future, and it looks a lot like Baltimore, and numerous other books you've written, former editor, the Reader's Digest, and media personality. We're just thrilled to have you back on.
Well, it's wonderful to be had, Kerry.
Well, we're all had at some point, one time or another. So, hey, your book.
But yes, here we are in a year unlike any other. After $8 trillion of Keynesian economic stimulus, the economy is growing at 0.7%, and probably less than that. We're skidding along the edge of recession if we're not already deep into it. The Fed that promised us they were going to raise interest rates are now talking about imitating Europe and going from ZIRP to NIRP, from zero interest rate policy that we've had for the last 7 years, into the magic of negative interest rates, meaning gone are the days when a bank will pay you token interest for having a bank account. Henceforth, you will have to pay a portion of your principal to the bank in a negative interest rate just to have a bank account. And what do you get for your bank account? Well, you get nothing, as I said. You get 20 major kinds of risk that threaten you, as Craig Smith and I addressed in an earlier book called Don't Bank on It. Oh, and you get other magic as well. You now get the fact that your bank spies on you for the government, for example, and reports to the government any odd transaction, and I mean anything unusual. If you bring in $1,000 that can't be readily explained and you put it in your bank account in cash, the bank is probably expected to tell the government that. Mm-hmm. What a wonderful world.
Yeah, well, hey, and not to mention all those nickel and diming nuisance fees that you were paying anyway. You get to keep on paying them, and they'll probably go up substantially in the not too distant
and when
future.
The bank finally is penalized by the government, and remember, the current administration has found that its best source of revenue is to impose billion-dollar fees for every little defect on the banks, so that the executive branch has its own source of income coming in that doesn't have to go through the Congress. Those fees are to the bank are why you get charged all these little fees, and we're going to NIRP now.
Mm-hmm. So
in effect, you're being taxed via the bank, just as you're being taxed in higher prices on everything, so the government can impose penalties and taxes heavier and heavier on business.
So we're going to NIRP. What's going to be the net result of it for the economy and for you?
Probably nothing good. Mm-hmm. But this shows the puzzlement of the Fed. The Fed is debating whether it's even legal under American law. Presumably they will make it legal if it isn't, but it's an attempt to give the bank some leverage somewhere. Remember how we were going to deleverage debt in the United States? Well, the Fed has now used pretty much all of its tools, so this is introducing a new magical tool that allows it to influence, to push the economy, nowadays like pushing on a string, as best it can. But the economy, I mean, my goodness, we have 94 million Americans who have no needed full-time job, either because they can't find one or they're not looking for one. We're entering in a society where a very large percentage of the population will not work at all. We still have 47% of the people paying no income tax whatever to the federal government. We have 49.5% of households in America where somebody living there is getting a government benefit check, a means-tested benefit of one kind or another. Social Security is wallowing in the slough of despond. Right now, 71% of the entire federal expenditure is either social programs or paying interest on the debt. And the interest on the debt right now has been basically interest at the 0% rate. So that's been the only thing that's kept the government afloat. If rates were ever to return to normal in our economic history, that's between 5 and 6%, you could pretty much kiss it goodbye, because every one of those percent will represent more than $500 billion of additional expenditure by the government just to cover the debt and the interest. So you'd be looking at another, $3 trillion added onto a federal revenue stream that right now is barely scraping $3 trillion.
Mm.
Things would not be good. Meanwhile, the good side of all this is if you choose to join the 94 million Americans without a full-time job, you can go to Hawaii right now, Kerry, and file for welfare. And the state of Hawaii will pay you $60,000 a year just to lay on the beach and sun.
Well, that sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, there are any number of states like that where the politicians have found it's worth using money taken from you and me to buy their perpetual reelection.
Mm-hmm.
That's what giving away all these goodies are. So as you see, we're in a kind of death spiral here. The London School of Economics analysts long ago concluded that the moment social spending or welfare benefits reach more than half the population, there is no recovery, because it's now in the interest of those people to vote to keep getting their benefits.
Well,
and we're sitting right now at 49.5% of that being the case, in effect.
well, the one thing I would say, though, is that not everybody who's getting those benefits really wants them. I think there's many people out there, Lowell, who would much rather have a job than a check.
Well, they would certainly make more from having a job. The problem is they would also incur taxes.
But
they would also incur all kinds of other problems that people on welfare don't need to worry about, at least directly. They're heavily taxed indirectly, but they don't know that. So they live in a kind of bliss. They don't realize the cost of everything they're buying incorporates massive taxes on business. And in a paper I have been working on lately with Craig Smith, we have the magic of what we nicknamed the trap. That is, you look around you and you suddenly notice that all kinds of things, all kinds of safety hatches that we used to be able to go to, or our ancestors found beneficial in this country, they're beginning to close and be locked behind us. For example, on January 1st, 2016, a new federal rule went into effect that allows the government, the IRS in particular, to revoke your passport or any passport of anyone they claim, and I say only claim, it doesn't have to be proven necessarily, owe significant unpaid taxes. They can simply shut down your ability to go to another country by closing down your passport. Most people don't realize that.
Oh, yeah, I saw that recently.
Most people don't realize that the TSA may soon stop recognizing driver's licenses at airports from up to 28 of the 50 states. They've targeted 4 states in particular for this. But that means when you go to the airport, it's not enough to be able to pull out your driver's license and say, here's my ID to get on the airplane. You will be required to bring out your passport. And if the IRS has shut down your passport, you may not even be able to fly to another state on a commercial airliner. I mean, that's how peculiar. I mean, this could affect more than half the states. No, they have increased under Mr. Obama the cost of renouncing U.S. citizenship. You see, we are one of those rare countries that just for being a citizen, if you earn money anywhere in the world, they expect to be able to tax you on that money, even if our government has not incurred a penny of expense in you earning that money. They have increased under Obama the cost of renouncing your citizenship to get free of that taxation by 422%. Americans now pay more than 20 times the average level charged in other high-income countries if someone wants to renounce citizenship. Hillary Clinton, meanwhile, has proposed on the campaign trail a huge penalty, perhaps 25% of total company assets on any company that wishes to move out of the U.S. So this has been seen before. For example, in 1931 in Germany, there was a Reich flight tax. The Reichsflugsteuer, something like this under a Hillary Clinton administration could punish any American company that tried to leave the United States. So you won't even be allowed to leave without incurring a massive penalty.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, it's also assumed that if you want to renounce your citizenship and you are a person of high means, if you're, say, a Kerry Lutz, the government now automatically assumes that your reason for renouncing citizenship is to avoid taxes. And that brings you under massive scrutiny And that massive scrutiny will continue to be attached to you legally for 5 years after you leave the country.
Yeah, well, I've heard about it from people who've moved to New York, from New York to, say, Florida or other low tax, no tax states, where they keep getting audited and audited for years on end for nothing. They didn't do anything other than move.
We call it the Rush Limbaugh syndrome.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well,
and let's see. Of course, under Obama, we have seen the implementation of FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, in which banks all over the world now have been squeezed politically to cooperate with our IRS to report any American who has an account there of $50,000 or more. Those banks are, in fact, in many cases, strong-armed to do tax withholding from any interest paid on those accounts to the IRS. And this comes through agreements the U.S. government has forced on 77,000 institutions around the world, just by saying to the local government, we'll do very bad things to you, we'll impair the work of all your companies in the U.S. and so on, if your banks do not cooperate with this. And so the IRS is strong-armed this kind of compliance through the foreign governments by their foreign banks. And hence, American citizens now are virtual pariahs in many of these countries and find it harder to do business. Bernie Sanders, the other Democratic candidate thus far, wants to impose a $1 trillion corporate income tax on whatever American companies earn overseas. There's a cheerful thought.
Yeah.
They are ending bank privacy in the U.S., as we've discovered, and we've written about at length. It can now be a crime to withdraw your own money from your own bank account in almost any amount, theoretically, as long as it adds up at the end of the year to $10,000 or appears to be trying to evade a $10,000 limit. Ask Denny Hastert, former Speaker of the House, about that.
Yeah, he's had his problems.
If you carry thousands of dollars in cash, however, to get out from under the cashless society and government surveillance, that cash makes you subject to asset forfeiture by federal, state, and local authorities who can simply grab whatever money you have on you, and then the burden of proof is on you to prove that that money was legally obtained, that it was not the result of drug transactions or the like. And of course, it's rather hard to prove a negative, but you will be asked to prove that the money is legitimately yours, and if you can't, the government will just keep all or most of it. The normal government tactic, of course, is to offer to give you back a portion of it if you'll sign a document agreeing to give the government the rest.
Well, that's nice of them.
So this again is strong arming of the crudest kind. The government is now in the process of banning $100 bills in the U.S. They're already laying the basis for doing that. $100 bills have always been suspect as the favored currency of drug dealers. They could probably confiscate all $100 bills in your wallet anyway, because something like 90% of the cash in your wallet at one time or another passed through the hands of a drug dealer. And if you're looking by mass spectrometry for parts per million or billion of substances, all they need to do is find 2 parts per million of cocaine, say, or heroin, somewhere on one bill in your wallet, and they can confiscate everything in your wallet based on that. Because it's then clearly currency that's been used in an illicit drug transaction. I mean, this is the way things are going. Oh, and in your bank, don't forget bail-ins.
Oh, good old
That is, when your
bail-ins.
bank finally owes the government money, and the government routinely finds pretext for that, if the bank cannot cover it out of its own assets, its own investors' assets, then under the new laws that President Obama agreed to, your bank account can be treated as an asset belonging to the bank. In fact, your bank account is way down on the list of things that are quasi-protected. So if the bank is short of money, your bank account may be confiscated. This is the bank account that is not paying you interest, but that is losing you up to 2% a year once we go to NERP. Now, what makes NERP and ZERP even more interesting, as you and I have discussed in the past, Kerry, you remember those times in Star Trek where the Starship Enterprise would be under some kind of attack, and the captain would say, "Warp us out of here, Scotty. Hit it as hard as you can." And Scotty would go to warp 9, and they would escape the danger, and the ship would be sitting safe amid the stars somewhere. And then Mr. Spock would say, "Captain, our star charts no longer work. We're in a part of the universe that
uncharted.
Our equipment doesn't even recognize. We are hopelessly lost. We don't even know which way is home." Well, that's what happens when you go to 0 or below 0 interest rates. You create such an artificial, bizarre economy that it ain't capitalism no more. It certainly isn't free enterprise in any meaningful sense. It is a manufactured, synthetic economic system that really doesn't even have a name. But it's one where the normal supply and demand, profit and loss don't matter. I mean, it becomes more sensible to borrow money than to save it, for example, in a zero interest rate society. Savings is discouraged. Wild borrowing is encouraged. This leads to massive amounts of malinvestment in the society. The money is totally artificial to begin with. It's simply run off the printing press to keep the society liquid. And whatever it is, it can't last very long because it's utterly synthetic. It will last only as long as people continue to believe in the faith-based currency. But if they begin to lose faith, as they were until the recent Chinese collapse, when the International Monetary Fund was on the verge of giving the Chinese yuan global reserve currency status to parallel the dollar, just as Iran has now gone over to acknowledging the euro as its official exchange currency instead of the dollar. Those things are devastating to the power of the U.S. dollar, which has existed mainly because it was backed by U.S. military might and because it once was the most trusted currency on earth. Well, now, since Richard Nixon broke the link between the dollar and gold, what's held up the dollar is that Saudi Arabia backed the dollar as the main exchange medium for its oil and for OPEC oil. That is now disintegrating out from under us, in part because the U.S. can no longer be trusted as an ally. And so we're seeing an utterly surreal world in which we may never get back to capitalism. And of course, everything that we used to count on for value, the dollar itself, stocks, where the Wall Street casino is now just run on artificial money, bonds no longer are honored by the government in the way they used to be. Look at Puerto Rico, for example. Property ceases to be a clear haven of value. The Obama administration is introducing its affirmatively furthering fair housing rule, which means basically the federal government is taking over zoning in every community in the country and is requiring certain amounts of poor or minority housing be provided in every community. This will shatter property values in much of the country. So you can see why many young people don't even want to buy a house anymore. They just want to rent a small apartment to live in. They have no confidence in the economy. And my God, above all of this, we have what Craig and I have long referred to as donkey drag in the economy. When you have a society where one of the two major political parties is openly socialist, openly hostile to capitalism, openly bent on confiscation and redistribution of the wealth of capitalists and their enterprises. I mean, Bernie Sanders now calling for up to a 90% tax on citizens. Hillary Clinton trying to parallel his policies as much as she can without seeming utterly insane. This is not reassuring. When you see the Obama administration openly trying to massively reinforce the death tax, or to go after all the usual means whereby prosperous families transferred wealth from one generation to another. And then on top of that, the coup de grace of our society, the government, in the name of progressivism, gave us security in the form of things like Social Security. It now turns out Social Security causes more insecurity than security in the population because we know it's a Ponzi scheme. We know it's going down unless a whole lot of rigging is done in a hurry. We know it cannot afford to go on as it has been. So what does that mean? Well, it means the government is now in the process of reneging on Social Security as fast as it can. How do you renege on a program like Social Security? Well, for one thing, when it was first created, it was not taxed at all. Then under Bill and Hillary Clinton, the tax on Social Security went up to 85%, by which I mean 85% of what you receive in a Social Security payment may now be taxable. And if you see, here's the game that the Obama administration and other progressives have played. First, they wreck the economy. This means that a lot of people like you and me, and I'm on the verge of 70 years old, you force people to go on working past the conventional retirement age. That means they have an income, but that income means that they now will be taxed. Mm-hmm. And that taxation will now pull over to Social Security itself, which will now be part of a higher income. And so the government is, in effect, clawing back a significant fraction of what people get in Social Security. That's a way of reneging on the program. They now are means testing, or are about to means test. Even Chris Christie, when he was running for president, every speech virtually would call for means testing Social Security. Well, that's nice, Chris. What that really means is, remember when you were in high school and there were the kids who were out in the restroom area smoking dope and having sex with each other and so on, while the good kids were in class working hard and keeping their nose to the grindstone. Well, those good kids have spent all their lives being taxed to pay for welfare benefits for the kids who were smoking dope. Mm-hmm. And now those kids who worked hard, who saved their money, who acquired assets, who did not just spend wildly but were thrifty in their lives, the government will now come along soon and say, oh, you have assets. Well, in that case, we're denying you your Social Security. You don't need it. So how fair is this system? So that those kids who were smoking dope in high school will continue to be able to get benefits from the government by taking away the benefits that you earned and were entitled to, and that you paid a fortune to get into. So here we are in a society spiraling downward in a negative interest rate or zero interest rate world still, as the Fed changes its mind about letting interest rates resume a natural, normal, healthy level in the society. There's more and more incentive not to work at all. There's tremendous disincentive against working because taxes are just going to keep going up on you if you are a successful worker in the society. And all the doors, or many of the doors that our ancestors would have used to escape, are now closing and locking. And here's the final challenge. Researchers at UCLA and elsewhere have hypothesized that apparently we have a particular gene widespread in the United States that causes an inherent restlessness, an inherent curiosity. Many have called it the entrepreneurial gene. It is a gene that drove our ancestors to leave wherever they were born and come here in search of opportunity and freedom. Now, what happens when people carrying that restless gene find themselves in a country that is being transformed, fundamentally transformed, into the very kind of country their ancestors fled from because it was oppressive? What happens when the United States becomes the old world, the anti-capitalist world? Well, that's what's now happening as you look around you. That, I submit, is a huge source of stress on people who have that gene. And that stress manifests in increased rates of cancer, heart attack, maybe even obesity, because you look around you. Why are people inclined to eat? One thing scientists have found in studying psychology is if you feel your next meal might not be there, if you feel that a crisis is coming, remember, we're all survivors over potentially millions of years. That survival was based on knowing when to put on fat before winter came.
I did that this winter,
if we intuitively are sensing that a massive crisis is about to happen, one response to that would be to eat more food, put on weight. That may be part of what the mysterious obesity epidemic hitting our culture actually is.
Well, some of you out there are much more prepared than others, that's for sure. 30, 40%, and it's worldwide, the obesity epidemic. So,
yeah, and by the way, these are the kind of topics that we have addressed in previous books. and ZERP and what's being done to housing and what's being done to Social Security, we address in this current book. We have seen the future, and it looks like Baltimore. A study of Baltimore as a battlefield between the American dream and the collectivist, utopian, progressive dream that now has taken over entirely one of our two political parties.
So, Lowell, the presidential election, is it going to matter? Trump make America great again?
Well, he'll certainly make America different. What frightens, I think, most of us about Mr. Trump is not that he lacks energy or skill. I mean, he is a genius at marketing. He is a master of keeping his opponents off balance, of sucking all the air out of the room, of bringing all media attention to himself. He is just a tactical master at that. The question is, since he has done so much by taking so many different positions, who really is Donald Trump? Who would he be if elected president? We just saw, for example, Mr. Trump a few days ago tell and contributing money to ads run against him. He said to them, they'd better be very careful. They have a lot to hide. I mean, he came about as close as you can come to a Mussolini-like threat against people. And this is not an opposing candidate. This is merely a wealthy family that was helping fund ads critical of Donald Trump. If he had all power to command the IRS and other government agencies, what would he do with that power given this predisposition to basically smash down opponents or critics?
Well,
we just don't know. He's a vast unknown because he does not have a conventional political history. We do know he has been a master of things like targeted bankruptcies and so on. Donald Trump used to be the poster boy. You would open your financial dictionary to that place where they say, if you owe the banks $5, you have a problem. If you owe the bank $5 billion, the bank has a problem. When you look at that listing, Donald Trump is the face next to that listing. I mean, he does have a history of
hey, he just used the laws,
pushing other people to make his fortune. And I suppose a critic could stand up and say, why are you saying you're self-made, Mr. Trump? You had a wealthy father in property. You started with a golden spoon in your mouth. It may not have been as big as some believe, but you didn't exactly make yourself. A whole lot of other people helped make you. So I don't know what kind of president he would be. I know that he's clearly smarter than most of his opponents.
And he is a workaholic.
I think he's demonstrated that if the U.S., under any of those other people as president, had to face a truly ruthless foreign opponent, a leader of China or Russia or whatever, I think Mr. Trump is a good test as to how well they'd be able to handle an unexpected challenge.
The
only one who's beat him as we speak, the only one who's beat him so far at anything was Ted Cruz.
Yeah, and this
has driven Trump almost crazy. He spent part of every speech explaining how he wasn't really beaten, how Ted Cruz cheated in Iowa to win that state. I mean, it's preying on his mind.
Well, not anymore. Not after he won the last three primaries, and he's preparing to sweep a large portion of the upcoming, and probably not much that can stop him. So, Lowell, what do we do here? We know the problems, all right? Solutions here. Talk to me about solutions.
Well, given the limited time we have, first let me say if people would like this book absolutely free and post-paid, we'd be happy to give it to any of your listeners, Kerry. All they need to do is call a toll-free number. Craig Smith and I, as you know, are like the Blues Brothers. This is our little mission from God, is to arm people with information to try to preserve the Republic for our children and grandchildren. So with that in mind, we just give these books away. This is number 6 in a series of 12 books we're doing. The toll-free number is 800-630-1494. That's 1-800-630-1494. Or, as I like to say, think of Columbus sailing the ocean blue in 1492, but not quite. It's 1-800-630-1494. Well, a hypothesis from the election. I look around, and yes, we all see that there is a rebellion against the old establishment in the country. Both Republicans and Democrats are sick of the forces that have taken control of their political parties, respectively. Mm-hmm. When Hillary Clinton sits there and says, I will not even reveal the manuscript or the transcript of speeches that I gave to Goldman Sachs for $225,000 a speech until all my opponents do, Bernie Sanders stood up and said, okay, Madam Secretary, I've given no speeches to Goldman Sachs or any other Wall Street interest. That's my transcript. Now release yours. And she refuses.
Yeah.
Why?
their bluff.
Because it would be too embarrassing.
Oh, somebody's
because
got
this is
them.
someone who claims to be a spokesman for the people, who has neatly pocketed more than $150 million for herself out of very wealthy special interests.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, on that note, we've got to go, Lowell, but things are definitely...
The book has lots of answers for people.
Yeah, so you need to get the book. Just give us the number again for the book, Lowell.
Toll-free number, 800-630-1494. And Kerry, I thank you for having the courage to talk about all these things. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on, Lowell. Always great to have you. We will talk to you again real soon. Be well.
You too.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.